Who is Mihawk? Mihawk, a man who has attained fame even before the great age of pirates, a former warlord, a man who was once feared by the Marines, his old title known as the Naval Hunter, a rival to the legendary Yonko Shanks. After fighting the world's best swordsman, he attained the title of world's strongest swordsman. Lives on Gloom Island with human drills, bloodthirsty mandrills who have learned to wield weapons with close to human intelligence. Let's quickly get into his debut, and then we're going to talk about Mihawk's strength, his character, and put some theories out there. Mihawk's debut was legendary and confusing to say the least. At the time, the Straw Hats have never faced an adversary that was in the same realm of power and influence. Mihawk's introduction was through the annihilation of the Dawn Creek Pirates. Jin, one of the members of the Dawn Creek Pirates, described his encounter with Mihawk as some sort of dream-like reality, his head extremely foggy from the pure shock that Mihawk inflicted upon him. It was to the point that Jin didn't even want to remember Mihawk at all, described as a man whose eyes can kill with but a glance. Mihawk destroyed an entire fleet of 50 ships. Everybody in the restaurant, including Sanji, the Straw Hats, and the rest of the cooks, were understandably surprised and experienced a shared fear as to what they were hearing. Mihawk had no real reason to attack the Dawn Creek Pirates. According to them, he attacked them out of nowhere. The head chef Zeph, once a reputable pirate from the Grand Line, was not shocked at all from the story, stating that Mihawk may have attacked them because they might have interrupted his nap, and Zeph stated that he was not joking and he was 100% serious. This is the man Zoro has been looking for his whole life. Mihawk arrived shortly after and easily destroyed the last massive Dawn Creek ship. The Dawn Creek Pirates were in shock and in horror as to why Mihawk was being such a menace, and Mihawk stated that this was all just for fun. They tried shooting at Mihawk, with Mihawk skillfully deflecting the bullets with the massive sword Yoru, and Zoro realized that this is the pinnacle, and he wants to challenge him immediately. Mihawk accepts Zoro's challenge but views Zoro as but a tiny rabbit and cannot respect him enough to use his main blade Yoru, and he pulls out his dagger configured from a necklace, stating that he will not go all out against somebody of Zoro's class. Zoro, a pretty capable fighter, was quickly shown throughout the fight to be nothing more than a frog in an ocean. Zoro, in complete shock as to how the difference in power was this staggering, completely humiliated and humbled by a mere dagger. However, Zoro showed resoluteness as a swordsman, asking Mihawk to end his life but not on his back, but on his chest, and Mihawk obliged, using his famous sword Yoru to inflict an egregious wound on him, while also making sure he did not kill him. Mihawk smiled and broke his usual serious character at the sight of a man who he has seen potential that may surpass his own. Mihawk also asked Luffy what his dreams are, being the captain of this man, and Luffy explained that he will be the Pirate King, which Mihawk proclaimed is an even tougher task than surpassing him. Mihawk ends up leaving without finishing the rest of the Dawn Creek Pirates, leaving them in physical and mental shambles. The readers for the first time have ran into one of the strongest characters in the entire world of One Piece, and it has shown us that there are monsters in this world that surpass our wildest imaginations. Luffy and Zoro realized that this is one of the insurmountable walls that they will have to climb in order to fully realize their dreams. Mihawk is one of the few characters, if not the only character in the show, that gives off a truly godly presence. Unlike characters like Big Mom and Kaido, Mihawk is an extremely calm, serious, and a very stoic man, rarely breaking character at all in the entire series. You don't see his emotions fluctuating to any certain degree at all. I'm not even sure if I've seen the man genuinely upset at anything so far in the story. Mihawk is also a man who doesn't bother remembering the faces or names of characters he deems as worthless with no grand future at all. If he doesn't respect you, you are pretty much garbage to him. Mihawk is a very capricious man, which is a person who gives to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. Let me explain. First of all, Zeph, a former reputable pirate who survived the Grand Line, 100% believed that when Mihawk attacked the Dawn Creek Pirates, it genuinely might have been because of his nap being interrupted. Mihawk stated that he was doing it for fun, and having fun is a way to alleviate boredom. So he massacred an entire fleet, all just to alleviate his boredom. He also chased them into the East Blue just to have a bit more fun. But here's the thing. After he sends the Dawn Creek Pirates into a state of shambles, without any ships and in mental disarray, he leaves after the fight and he didn't even finish them off. And this is the important part about this. Mihawk could have one-shotted everyone in the vicinity at the time. But even after Dawn Creek attacked Mihawk at the very end, he simply did not care and still left, and that speaks volumes. This should have been pure disrespect, and I expected Mihawk to slaughter Dawn Creek in this moment after he did such a thing. But Mihawk stated that he was done with him, and he's officially bored, and that's that. He succumbs to his boredom so drastically, it literally looks like he's suffering from some sort of disease. You massacred this whole man's life, and in the moment you feel bored, even when provoked and attacked, you will still leave the premises, and that's insane. Even within the latest chapters, Mihawk was excited to be chased by the Marines after losing his warlord status, and he's ready to start taking Marines' heads, But then in the latest chapters, Mihawk is not trying to kill the Marines who are swarming his home island, and that he finds them a nuisance to the point that he's willing to relocate rather than absolutely low-diffing the entire Navy fleet that's outside of his island. Think about this for a moment. He doesn't find something interesting in the slightest. He will not even bat an eye and will do anything to leave or ignore whatever he's lost interest in. He could have easily wiped out that fleet that's surrounding his island, but he would literally rather move and settle down in a new house on a new island than take care of some measly Marines. When he's bored, he's bored. He is definitely not a man you want to try and accomplish a mission with, which is important later on. Mihawk also seems like a person who is extremely battle hungry and only wants to fight the pinnacle of opponents at their pinnacle in strength, or what he would assume to be their pinnacle in strength. Mihawk was a warlord not too long ago, and there are benefits to becoming a warlord. Some of the benefits included resources normally not allowed for pirates, and information on other pirates that is quick and reliable. Warlords also commonly abuse the system for use of corrupt control, just like Doflamingo and Crocodile. Warlords also gain amnesty for any past actions, with their bounties being rescinded. So there are a couple of options as to why Mihawk could have decided to become a warlord. The first is that becoming a warlord would allow him to live more peacefully than the average pirate would, without having to worry about Marines constantly swarming him. This is also supported in his vivid card as well, stating that he wants to travel freely and sail for fun in the sea. The other option is becoming a warlord in some sort of secret agent way to infiltrate the Marine system to find out more information or to gather intel and materials for somebody he may be working for in secret. The third option is to become a warlord to quickly and readily find out information on certain pirates without having to go through the hassle of doing all the work himself and letting the Marines do most of the work. He rarely attends warlord meetings at all, albeit most of the warlords do not attend the meetings all the time because a lot of the warlords are infamous pirates who do not care to cater to the Marines. But the only time that we've seen Mihawk attend the meetings was when he wanted to find out about Luffy and Zoro because he held interest in them. And then the second time was when the warlords were called into action to fight Whitebeard. He was ready and looking forward to testing his skills against one of the most legendary pirates of all time. That's why I'm leaning towards the angle that he was mostly in the warlord system to gather more information on pirates. He could have been some sort of spy or something like that. That's still in the table. But yeah, pirates that he finds interest in, whether that be in strength or character, he will try to find out what he can in the moment. The way he acted in chapter 1058 can sort of contradict this because Mihawk states that he just wants to live in peace, and that's the whole reason that he's okay with Buggy being the figurehead, because he'd rather Buggy take all of the heat so he could be more in the background. And that's also the reason he's not interested in the title of Yonko. And that's because leading an empire of soldiers, commanders, and controlling territory, and also having to defend that territory and fight adversaries out of the blue does not sound like the most peaceful life to me. So I respect it to a certain degree. But him wanting peace could just be due to his personality complex and him switching sides between wanting to do pretty much anything to have fun and alleviating his boredom to immediately deciding that he wants no part of it. So yeah, he's suffering from some sort of mental anguish for sure. Mihawk also might be one of the few characters who actively seeks out ultimate strength, besides characters like Blackbeard, Goldie Roger, Roxy Zebek, and Zoro. And I bring up those characters because Goldie Roger, as we've seen in the flashback, was willing to try to stop Rayleigh and Scopper Gaban to be able to fight Odin himself. Goldie Roger reminds me a lot of Goku, and that he's just willing and looking for a strong opponent to fight. Zoro's ambition is literally to become the world's strongest swordsman, so he seeks power inherently. Roxy Zebek and Blackbeard seem like one and the same. Blackbeard looking for the strongest devil fruits possible to become the strongest person to exist in the One Piece world. I didn't mention characters such as Kaido and Luffy, because for Kaido, he was simply looking for a character to take him out. He was essentially just a suicidal maniac, and due to his natural strength being too high, was hindering a lot of characters from being able to kill him. And for Luffy just wants to be the king of the pirates, which doesn't necessarily mean that he will need to be the strongest character in the show. However, I do believe Luffy will end up being the strongest character in the show besides Emu, but being the pirate king does not necessarily mean you have to become the strongest in the show. But as far as Mihawk's concerned, he has literally fought some of the strongest swordsmen and has tried to fight the strongest characters, manly swordsmen, to eventually become the world's strongest swordsman. The last thing for his character I just want to get into is Mihawk's apparent lack of trust. And in recent chapters, Crocodile mentioned the fact that Mihawk is a person who lacks trust, and that is very interesting. I believe he lost trust due to somebody betraying him, and we'll get into that later, but Mihawk seems to trust Shanks to a certain degree, especially when you look at the interactions between Mihawk and Shanks, but we'll save that for later. Mihawk was also known as a naval hunter, and that can relate to his character in some sort of way. The reason why Mihawk could have hunted Marines in the past could due to him simply being bored, and he may have wanted to fight the strongest Marines possible. It could have been for revenge or things of that nature. I just find it odd that the Marines would allow a person who hunted them like animals into their warlord system, but it could be the Marines just trying to keep their strongest enemies close. There's definitely something more about Mihawk that we don't know regards to that. I honestly think Oda was trying to draw some sort of parallel between Mihawk and Zoro. You know how Zoro hunted pirates for money to survive basically before becoming a pirate himself? Mihawk hunted Marines before eventually joining the Marines in some sort of way, you know, the warlord system. So there's some sort of parallel there. Zoro did it for money. Mihawk most likely did not do it for money. He most likely did it for pride, reputation, honor, or revenge, something of that nature. Later on in the theory section, I get into who he could have worked for and the reason why he could have hunted Marines in the past. But yeah, that's for later. Regardless, let's move on to how strong Mihawk is and his current status as the world's strongest swordsman. So Mihawk is known as the world's strongest swordsman. However, there seems to be heavy misconceptions about his power and what the world's strongest title may mean. I may not have the right answers, but listen to how I interpret all of his perceived downplay, all of his current feats, his weapons, his haki prowess, and what his title may mean. In this section, we will only be talking about what we know 100% to be confirmed, and a theory on his end of story powers will come in a later section. First, let's get the easy stuff out of the way. He is not confirmed to have a devil fruit power at the current moment. His current confirmed haki abilities range within the color of observation and color of armament. He is not confirmed to have Conqueror's haki. His sword Yoru is a legendary blade known as one of the 12 supreme grade blades of the world, and it is a black blade, which is a blade permanently clad with haki, increasing its durability by a considerable margin, while also increasing the sword's rank by at least 1. So Mihawk's blade should technically be a rank above supreme grade blade, as confirmed in chapter 955 when Sukiyaki told Zoro that Enma hasn't been forged to a black blade yet, and that Enma could potentially raise his grade when becoming a black blade. We do not know what makes a good sword in One Piece to its fullest extent, but any good blade in real life has a couple of qualities to look for in terms of what makes it good. A good sword is weighted perfectly to make it as light as possible for its frame, is made with high quality metal and materials, has good heat treatment from the forging process, good flexibility, perfect balance between toughness and hardness, good hilt integrity, good blade polish, a good tang support for whatever blade you use, and of course its sharpness and overall cutting ability. So we can assume that in One Piece, these factors will determine the differences between ranks in sword quality. So we can assume that in terms of quality, Yoru has all of these factors, and with Yoru being a supreme grade blade with a higher rank than supreme, it should be the most powerful sword that exists in One Piece as of right now. Also, when it comes to swords in One Piece, Oda draws personalities of the swords, and this is a picture of Yoru's personality and his mini cross swords personality. I like to think of these characters as souls of the sword, but it may just be a personification of what the sword acts like. Kind of like when you apply names to cars in real life, and when you give those cars personality traits based on how the car runs. So if a car is very rickety, it always like bumps a lot, it doesn't really start, and it's just giving you problems, you can give it a grandpa type of name, like call it Old Jeffrey or something, or Old Bobby, to describe the car using a name, like give it its own personality, its own soul. That's what I believe the personification of swords to be. So let's get into his feats. Mihawk's first feat in One Piece is deflecting the bullets, which is very important and ties into his true power and what makes him the strongest swordsman, and what Zoro needs to achieve to reach that true next level. Mihawk states that without subtlety, a sword is nothing but an iron bar, and Zoro mentions that he has never seen such subtle sword work in his life. So we can assume from this statement that ultimate finesse is required to be a strong swordsman. Oh, but J. Apollo, it's world's strongest swordsman. Skill and finesse is strength for a swordsman, not just brute haki and physical power. As Zoro and Mihawk fought for the first time, he also mentions that Zoro's swordsmanship is extremely heavy-handed, mentioning the lack of finesse that he probably expects from exceptional swordsmen. So even though Zoro is hitting hard, he lacks that skill, those time precision technique type shits. This speaks to what Mihawk could be better than any swordsman at, period. Even in recent chapters, Bernu makes sure to drive home the point that Mihawk's advantage over Shank's is his sword skills. Not haki, not pure physical strength, but skills. That's not to say Mihawk does not have good haki or isn't incredibly strong, but the story keeps emphasizing these points when it comes to good swordplay. Now, I'm going to get into certain events, statements, and feats that can be used to downplay, highball, or accurately place him where he should be at strength-wise in the story, but I'm going to start at downplay first. First off, I hate talking about Marineford War in terms of power scaling. Marineford War is so damn shitty and is so all over the place that I believe we shouldn't even look at this arc when trying to accurately determine the strength of a character. I'm almost 10,000% positive that Oda did not have his power system fully fleshed out and established at this point. Even to this day, the Haki system is far from perfect, but we're gonna look at the war regardless because it is canon. So for some downplay, let's talk about what he meant when he tried to attack Whitebeard for the first time. Mihawk stated that he wanted to measure the true distance between that man and us. I've literally seen some of the most bullshit reasons as to why he said this. Some people even had the nerve to say he launched that attack to measure the physical distance, like the space between him and Whitebeard. If you think he was doing that to measure the literal distance between him and Whitebeard, please do not talk to me. Anyways, when he said he wanted to measure the distance between Whitebeard and him, he was most likely referring to him wanting to find out if Whitebeard was really that guy. How strong is Whitebeard compared to him? It was really just a gauge of power, nothing more, nothing less. He wasn't really stating that because he thought himself as inferior. He literally just wanted to test out how strong he is because he's never fought Whitebeard, and Mihawk would just be stupid if he assumed he was either weaker or stronger than Whitebeard without ever fighting Whitebeard. So he was just trying to fix his ignorance on that matter. Then when Jozu blocked Mihawk's attack, oh my god, this was crazy downplay for Mihawk when it should have just been a feat for Jozu. Jozu did block the strike with relative ease, and you also have certain pirates or marines talking about that, oh, Jozu stopped the world's most powerful slash. Remember, these are literally fodder talking, and the world's most powerful slash is just referring to a slash that was launched by the world's strongest swordsman, not literally the most powerful slash in his arsenal. I'll get into his slashing power later, but it is literally stated in the manga that a good swordsman in One Piece can pretty much cut what he wants to cut. That slash was intended for Whitebeard, not Jozu, who has a diamond fruit, one of the most durable fruits when it comes to defensive fruits in One Piece. He did not intend to cut diamond in that slash. After the slash, you can clearly see Mihawk wasn't too surprised, if even surprised at all, when Jozu blocked it, showing that he didn't really care too much that he did block it. So we have seen instances to where Mihawk seems to be having a rough time in Marineford War, killing Luffy, seemingly having a good fight between him and Vista, getting blocked by Mr. One for even a second, getting caught off guard by Crocodile when Crocodile intervened between him and Luffy. These things were extremely confusing to me at the time. As far as having a rough time trying to kill Luffy, I'm going to say that Mihawk's goal was not to kill Luffy in that exchange. He was most likely fighting Luffy at Marineford War to see what kind of person Luffy is. He wanted to see if this goofy kid is really worth having such a grand dream and if Luffy really had a godlike fate. And he wanted to fight the man who captains the man with the ambitions to become the world's strongest swordsman, who may end up surpassing him one day. Luffy was also a person who ended up defeating multiple warlords like Moria, Crocodile, and Mihawk wanted to figure out and test the man who Shanks lost an arm for as well. Shanks basically gave up the pinnacle of swordsmanship to bet on his kid. He wanted to see the kid who took away his strongest rival in swordsmanship and his only source of fun. He also wanted to see what Luffy's true power was, and he also realized that Luffy's true power is bringing allies and foes alike to his cause. He was pretty much interested in Luffy's plot armor because let's be serious, Mihawk is a man on a caliber of Shanks, and Luffy wasn't even close to top 30 in the show at that time. Mihawk could have easily low-diffed Luffy in a couple of seconds. There is no way that Mihawk was going all out and trying to kill him. So yeah, let's stop with that. So in terms of Haki, I believe that Mihawk has the best observation Haki to exist, or the most potent observation Haki to exist. And there's definitely a difference in that, and I'll explain that in my observation Haki video in a later video. But when you have instances like Crocodile genuinely catching Mihawk off guard, it kind of throws me off, and that's why I do not like Marineford War. For example, Katakuri with Future Sight, he would have never been caught off guard by anybody, to be honest, in that war. So yeah, that was kind of iffy. But we could see that Mihawk was able to use observation Haki to pinpoint Gear 2 was going at high speed in the war and everything. And he also used crazy precision to be able to pinpoint Luffy within the chaos of the battlefield. But it's just not up to par for what we've seen Haki, especially observation Haki, in the story to be. And this is because I don't think Oda has fully fleshed out what he wanted to do. And his fight with Vista also comes into question. So a lot of people like to downplay Mihawk based on his fight with Vista, as well as stating that the fight was too good and it was a little bit too even. Again, this shouldn't be something to downplay Mihawk, but something to amp up Vista's status. And let's talk about Vista real quick. So there's a couple of databook references. I've seen Vivid card references as well that talk about Vista and his fight with Mihawk. Vista on his Vivid card states that he is an incredibly skilled swordsman, amongst the best in the world, referencing top class, being able to compete against Mihawk. Despite Mihawk's insane power, Vista wasn't the least bit afraid about rushing in to confront him. Vista is a confirmed armament hockey user and a confirmed observation hockey user. And in a One Piece visual dictionary, it states that Vista has skills to compete with Mihawk, one of the most famous swordsmen in the world. And in One Piece Deep Blue, Vista shows his swordsmanship, which is equal or superior to Mihawk in this fight. A lot of people like to put Vista really high up because of these statements. However, let's look at it again. It literally says, in this fight with Mihawk. This fight was extremely unique in the story. There is no way in hell that Mihawk was going all out in this fight. This was a specific fight with Mihawk. He wasn't even fully paying attention to Vista the entire time. He was focusing on Luffy a lot throughout that fight. So let's stop downplay with Mihawk right now. Mihawk's holding back and not really paying full attention to an extremely strong swordsman. Now that's out of the way. Then one of the most controversial moments for Mihawk in the story was when he decided to leave Marineford because Shank showed up. This moment could unironically be used to either wank or downplay Mihawk, and let me explain. So when Mihawk showed up, Mihawk decided to leave, and you could say a couple of things. You can say that Mihawk left truly because it wasn't part of his contract with the Marines, and he follows his contract to the T, and that he was only there to fight Whitebeard. Second, you can say he left because Shanks is a friend, and he was not willing to take on Shanks in such a crucial moment in history just to battle with him. Because Shanks wasn't just there to fight, he was there to end a whole war. So it wouldn't have even been a duel between him and Shanks, and that would just disgrace the rivalry and friendship that they have for each other. Another thing you can say is that Mihawk left because he was scared of Shanks and what he could do strength-wise if he were to fight him, especially in that moment with Shanks most likely willing to go all out in the fight. So some people like to say that Mihawk left because Shanks would have demolished him. And you have some people saying that Mihawk left because he knew he would decimate Shanks and ruin Shanks' reputation, and that's why he didn't want to fight him. Now, all of these reasons is extremely headcanon-y, but I believe he truly left because of his rivalry and friendship with Shanks, and out of respect for Shanks because he's already violated him enough throughout the war. And the way he violated Shanks was when he first swapped hands with Luffy, and you could see he apologized to Shanks before trying to fight and take out Luffy, because he knew Luffy was important to Shanks, so doing that alone was too crazy. And remember, this was a war to save Luffy's brother as well, so he was helping the Marine cause by stopping Whitebeard from saving Ace, so that was already crazy disrespect to Luffy, which in turn is disrespectful to Shanks. But Mihawk couldn't even help himself, and he needed to test out Luffy as soon as possible because he was fiending. So after violating once already, and violating probably his only true friend in the world, he decided that enough was enough, and he wasn't going to tread on that friendship any more than he already has. And he would just leave the war, not because he was afraid of Shanks, not because he was afraid he would decimate Shanks, but simply because that it's his friend, and he's done too much, and he refuses to fight someone who he trusts in such a crucial moment in history. So that moment to me was more of a wholesome moment, if anything. Even when Mihawk went to go visit Shanks and his crew, people like to say that Mihawk wasn't scared at all, and the reason he went there solo dolo is because he knew he could low diff the entire crew. Absolute nonsense. Literally absolute nonsense. I refuse to believe some people believe the crap that they are saying. There is no way Mihawk, who has an intense rivalry with one person, most likely an extreme high diff fight between him and Shanks, could take out not only Shanks, but his entire crew as well. Mihawk wants to have a good battle, but he also wants to live in peace, bro. He is not trying to get jumped by a pirate crew all at once. He's not really about that life. He just wants to fight strong people. There is also a reason why he's comfortable going to Shanks' island solo without fear of being killed, but I'll explain that in the Shanks section. But come on people, really, Mihawk wasn't scared because he could take out Shanks' whole crew. Idiotic! You would not see Mihawk doing this to Kaido or Big Mom. He's just not going to go to any Yonko crew and try to take them all solo dolo. Mihawk gets decimated by any Yonko and their crew jumping him, and that's just a fact. There is no character in the show that can walk solo dolo into a Yonko's roof and his entire crew in a straight-on confrontation and come out alive. Even Goldie Roger and Whitebeard or Rocks. It'd be hard-pressed for you to say that Mihawk can even beat most Yonko one-on-one. That has to stop now. So for more perceived downplay for Mihawk, for some strange reason, Mihawk The world's strongest swordsman, the world's greatest, the world's most powerful swordsman wasn't even mentioned once in the entire arc of Wano, the land of the supposed legendary swordsman, the home of the sword god Ryuma. So Mihawk might have not had any interaction with the land of Wano, but bro, is Oda saving that for later? Did he forget about something? Is he gonna come back to that? Or did Mihawk just straight up never went to Wano and never fought any legendary swordsman from Wano? Bro, that's sus. And then as for Kaido's top 5, Mihawk isn't on that list. Kaido's top 5 is a very debated subject. Kaido's top 5 most likely pertains to people that he deems to have the highest potential in the story, because Odin was in that list, and I believe that Odin loses to Mihawk 100%. But this list was most likely based on potential and strength rather than their current strength, because you can get snuffed out before you reach your maximum potential. So Mihawk could have beaten Odin, but Odin's potential was probably just absurd. We have also seen Shanks on the list, and this could just mean that Shanks has a higher potential ceiling and that Shanks is not currently stronger than Mihawk, but who knows? Kaido may have never seen Mihawk in battle, so he may have not known what he's about. And before anybody says anything, this top 5 was 100% based on some strength metric. Kaido literally was punched by Luffy, which damaged him, and he wondered how Luffy got so strong, then thought about his top 5. So yeah, this list was definitely gauged on some sort of strength basis. The main questions I have for Mihawk would be if Mihawk would still be considered the world's strongest swordsman if he used a normal grade sword, because he should technically have the most powerful sword in existence so far in the story, and yeah, that's a huge advantage. And my next question would be if Mihawk has Conqueror's Haki, because if Mihawk is able to keep up with these top tiers without having some sort of Conqueror's Haki coding, that would make Mihawk extremely different, and he would have to have something busted in order to keep up with the top tiers of the show. But with all the downplay and all the meat munching out of the way, let's get into Mihawk and Shanks' rivalry. The relationship between Mihawk and Shanks is an interesting one in terms of friendship, trust, and loyalty. However, one of the most heavily debated topics in anime period is how strong they are compared to each other. We know that Mihawk is a man who lacks trust in people, and that could be the reason why he's in pure isolation and likes to roam the seas alone. However, there seems to be a very scant few people that he can actually trust, and one of those people is Shanks. Let's look at it really quickly. So first, before Mihawk tried to fight Luffy in the war, he was actually seen apologizing to Shanks because he knew just how much Luffy meant to him, and the only reason he fought Luffy was to test how Luffy is accomplishing what he's accomplishing. And then Mihawk went to Lowtown to visit Shanks and asked him about Luffy because of the stories Shanks has told him before. This moment shows a huge amount of trust that Mihawk has with Shanks. Okay, let me explain. There is no way in hell that Mihawk, who was most likely going to extreme high diff fights with Shanks, would be able to take out Shanks and his whole entire crew on in a fight. Because a lot of people believe that Mihawk wasn't scared because he knew he would just low diff them or he would just beat the crew if anything, but no. Mihawk wouldn't have done this to any other Yonko crew, and that's just facts. Imagine Mihawk walking into Kaido's base or something. You think Mihawk would trust Kaido at all or trust his men enough to not literally jump him and destroy him? Kaido literally might give Mihawk a one-on-one because he's suicidal and wants a legendary battle to end his life, but at the very end of the day, his crew is finna jump Mihawk on everything if they see Kaido getting too low on HP. Facts. So Mihawk wasn't just confident enough to walk into a Yonko's crew territory like Shanks. He trusts Shanks enough to not jump him, and Shanks probably only wants to have 1v1 battles with Mihawk. Please do not try to convince me that Mihawk can take out Shanks' entire crew. If you think he can take on his entire crew, you are bugging. And if you think Mihawk would walk into any other Yonko's territory like he did with Shanks, you are also bugging. Shanks is the only person he's doing this with. Even in Shanks' Vivier card, it states that Shanks is a very nice and courteous man. Even with his opponents, he shows due respect when necessary. So you can assume that applies to Mihawk as well. Okay, so now let's get into when Shanks and Mihawk actually fought. So Shanks and Mihawk apparently had legendary duels that helped bolster Shanks' overall lore, and Mihawk eventually became known as the world's strongest swordsman. Some people have Mihawk above Shanks due to the fact that he's the world's strongest swordsman, and it is confirmed that Shanks is indeed a swordsman, so that should shut down everything. However, the detractors say that Shanks is stronger because Shanks is much more than a swordsman. Let's just say I'm not on either side until I see what the hell happened in these duels, because there's a lot of nuance to this debate that you would be surprised to hear about. Again, lots of downplay and lots of extreme meat munching goes on each side. Hear me out. First, the bounties. Shanks has a 4,048,900,000 berry bounty, and Mihawk's bounty is 3,590,000,000 berry bounty. Now, we know a bounty just doesn't reflect a strength of a person. You know, you got factors like influence and power being in the mix as well. So yeah, there's many factors that goes into the bounties. But as for Mihawk, his bounty is mostly predicated on strength. So to have a bounty so close to Shanks is extremely damn impressive. So that helps Mihawk a lot. However, let's be real. Any Yonko level character, if they travel the seas alone, would have an insane bounty. Like imagine Kaido on the seas by himself. We're not giving this man a bounty of 1 billion just because he doesn't have a crew. He's still absurdly strong, and very few pirate crews, not just pirate, but whole pirate crews, would be able to take on Kaido in a fight, period. Only a crew of Yonko or a Yonko himself can take out Kaido. Plus, Kaido is literally battle hungry and insane. So if he was by himself on the seas, he would probably have a 3 billion plus level bounty himself for sure. But there's also something very interesting that Banu states when presenting Mihawk's bounty, and that he has greater sword skill than even the red-haired emperor. See what I'm talking about? It's like Oda knows that this debate is going on and is purposely planting seeds of discourse for us to be even more confused. Why would he state that Mihawk has greater sword skill instead of just outright stating that Mihawk is stronger than Shanks? And I stated earlier in the Marineford War, I believe the reason Mihawk left when Shanks arrived was for 2 things. First, Shanks is someone he respects and a person he's fought legendary duels with, and he knows if he fucks with Shanks in this moment, his whole crew is messing him up. Because Shanks wasn't just there to fight, they came there to end a war and had no time to be worrying about respecting the 1v1s that Shanks and Mihawk had. And plus, Mihawk is Shanks' friend in a weird way, and Mihawk already decided to fight Luffy, which was disrespectful to Shanks, so he decided to leave. Speaking of the fight with Shanks, how exactly was that proctored and ran? And was it friendly duels at first, or was it more brutalistic fights in the beginning, then they became friends and the duels were more respectful after that? So, we can assume that Shanks met Mihawk at Roger's execution, in which Shanks was 16 and Mihawk was 20. And then they started dueling after that. But here's the thing. Was their first battle when Shanks had a crew already, or at the very least when he met Ben Beckman? Second, did it evolve to more friendly rivalry type battles and less to the death? And the reason I ask this is because if Shanks didn't have his crew when he first met Mihawk, then Mihawk most likely won in an all-out crazy battle with Shanks, showing him mercy at the very end. Because Shanks' crew isn't letting Shanks die, period. And if you look at the ages of Mihawk and Shanks when they should have met, Mihawk was 20, which is a year older than Luffy right now. So Mihawk was most probably a Yonko caliber fighter at the time, and when Luffy was 16, just like Shanks was at that time, Luffy wasn't even close to first commander level. So Mihawk should have been way closer to his prime, even to this day, the whole entire time. We've seen characters like Kaido and Big Mom well above their 40s, just reaching their prime. So that's an advantage to Mihawk the whole time they've been fighting. And we know that Mihawk hasn't fought Shanks after he lost his arm, and Shanks lost his arm at 28. So from around the time that Shanks was 16 to 28, and Mihawk was 20 to 31, those are the time periods when the battles were most likely happening. So they both shouldn't have been at their prime at all, and we also do not know who won more fights. Did Mihawk win every single time they fought? Were there rules at all for the fight? Like, were they allowed to use everything in their arsenal, such as haki? Could they only use their swords? Because remember, what we've seen in recent chapters, Shanks can send haki blasts, like Conqueror's haki lightning blasts that can affect top tiers from a distance. So would that be against the rules in a swordsman duel? And if you look at the word duel, a contest with deadly weapons arranged between 2 people in order to settle a point of honor. So you can clearly see that duels are arranged and set in stone for honor. So these duels might have had rules to keep the honor in battle as fellow swordsmen. So there might have been heavy restriction placed on them in the battles. I think the honor point is extremely important. And in order to really exemplify my point, let's look at the fight between Zoro and King. Okay, so King is a proficient swords user and a swordsman to a certain degree. And Zoro is clearly a swordsman. But if you look at that fight, Zoro was having a massive problem against King. So watch this real quick. In the beginning of the fight, Zoro literally thought King was a swordsman because he had a sword. However, King stated that you don't need a school or style to fight in which Zoro agrees, right? And Zoro, the proudest swordsman, was willing to use other tactics in the fight, not for honor, but for the war. So in the beginning of the fight, they were both talking spicy, stating that they will do other things besides use a sword to end each other's life. but obviously Zoro is going to fight with swords the whole time. But when King and Zoro were fighting in the beginning, with Zoro respecting the way of the sword and King battling with his normal tactics to win this 1v1, King was destroying Zoro. Like, Zoro literally had no chance at all. King was slaughtering him. And guess what? Even though Zoro said that he would be willing to try other shit to win, he was still asking King to let him die by the sword and to show a little respect. Bro, what? This couldn't be a bigger hint as to what goes on in the mind of a swordsman and what they would like to happen in a battle between other people who wield the sword. A swordsman or a true swordsman most likely wants a respectful duel with swords with honor and to die by the sword as well. And this is Zoro asking some guy in the middle of war in which you're fighting for other people and not just yourself. And Zoro's request for King was to use his sword to land finishing blows is pretty selfish if you ask me. King was slaughtering Zoro, flying in the air, using pincer laser-like attacks from his head, and Zoro couldn't even block it properly. None of Zoro's attacks did heavy damage at all. And guess what, guys? Guess when the tide of battle started tipping in Zoro's favor? When King decided for some strange-ass reason, in the middle of war, to use his blade, stating that he will give Zoro a sword fight because he enjoys a good duel and he doesn't want too much of an advantage. Again, the use of the word duel. Bruh, do I even need to restate this shit? And the only reason King lost was because he turned off his defensive flame power for some random reason, and that allowed Zoro to do critical damage. The point of this was just to show that King, a pseudo swordsman, was slaughtering a pure swordsman Zoro to the point where Zoro couldn't even block his attacks, damage, or do anything about, and only lost to Zoro when he accepted a battle of swords and to have a good duel with Zoro, even though King lost due to a drop in his IQ with fire abilities. So the moment King showed honor as a swordsman, RIP. Listen, I said this to relate to what a battle between Mihawk and Shanks could have been, or maybe, you know, it could have not been, who knows, but I just used this to prove a point, because it's like, are you the world's strongest swordsman because of your skills, strength, and finesse, but also mainly because you're the strongest person when it comes to a pure swords fight? So you can use your hockey, but when it comes to devil fruits, does that come into play? Does that change up what the sword fight becomes? Again, were the duels fought with respect as a swordsman? If there were any rules and stipulations to the fight, that automatically messes up the debate like crazy. Rules in literally anything in life, especially combat sports or competitions, can restrict you heavily from doing what it takes to win. It's kind of like in MMA. You can't necessarily try to rip someone's eyes out or something like that to win the fight, even though that would be extremely effective. You just can't do it. I may also have some interesting information that people may or may not know about already. So in one SBS, Oda is asked the name of red-haired Shanks' sword, and Oda replies it is called Griffin. And we've known Shanks ever since the very first chapter, but how does he actually fight? So what does that mean exactly? Is Oda implying that Shanks fights with more than just sword abilities? Plus, we know that Mihawk and Shanks were both most likely not fighting at their prime level in terms of their age. Could there be something else that would have gave Shanks an advantage in any fight that he just wouldn't have done in a fight between Mihawk? We also have statements stating that Shanks was once as powerful as the world's best swordsman. There are also statements made in Mihawk's favor, such as Mihawk, the world's most powerful swordsman. He sits atop as the strongest, gazing down at his prey. Even now, he reigns supreme as the world's strongest swordsman in both name and actuality, an exceptional master swordsman. So with this information, it would almost be stupid to have Shanks above Mihawk. So guys, this is the last thing too. While I'm doing research for this, for some reason, I have never asked myself if Shanks was right-handed or left. Shanks lost his left arm to the Sea King, and I always thought that Oda let him keep his dominant hand not to nerf him too crazy. But guess what? There is a 99.99999% chance that he was left-handed, bro. Like his left hand was his most dominant hand. Bro, look at these panels real quick of Shanks. I always thought that this picture of Shanks literally all my life was him wielding two swords, so I thought he was just equally nice with both hands. But I took a closer look. Apparently that's a scabbard and not a sword. Shanks' sword Griffin is literally a saber with a grip that should be for two hands because it is too long for a single hand sword. And guys, apparently swordsmen sheath their sword or draw their sword on the opposite side. And if you look at Shanks for most of his life, his scabbard is placed on the right side of his body. Apparently swordsmen draw on the opposite side, so their dominant hand is used to block incoming attacks when drawing across their body. And then the sword's length has to be taken into account because it would be hard to draw on the same side that your hand is on. There were times in the anime where Shanks had the scabbard on his left, but that might just been some animation crap. But look at everything else. Shanks holds his sword in the left hand and drew the sword from the left hand. and held the scabbard in his right. If you look at some martial arts practices in the world with the sword, such as Siljan Dopuk, Laido Laijitsu, Kenjutsu, they all draw from their dominant hand. And if you look at other notable swordsmen like Roger, Rayleigh, Garp, Ryuma, Fujitora, Law, Shiryu, Cavendish, and Kanjuro, they draw their swords from the opposite side, most likely with their dominant hand, the hand they use for their most powerful and potent attacks. So Shanks right now shouldn't even be at maxed nerf power, because he most likely is using his weak hand since he lost his dominant hand to the Sea King. And here's the thing, I think Oda definitely wrote this detail into the story, and Oda should know about drawing the sword from the opposite side with your dominant hand. And Mihawk probably recognized how Shanks got nerfed from this. Mihawk stated that he would not fight a one-armed Hasman when Shanks asked him if he wanted to fight. I think this was for two reasons. First, as a swordsman, both hands should be used in order to use maximum strength, especially with a two-handed sword like Griffin. And you cannot apply maximum finesse and skill with one hand in general. And that Shanks not only lost the use of two arms, but he also lost the use of his strongest arm. So if I was Mihawk, I would definitely not fight a man who calls himself a swordsman who lost not only his arm, but his best arm. That should be beneath Mihawk, who is known as the world's strongest swordsman, and disrespectful to the code or honor as a swordsman, period. Mihawk's sword should also be a massive advantage too. A black supreme grade blade sword should be much better than Shanks' sword Griffin. Even if Griffin was a supreme grade blade, Mihawk would have a rank higher than that. Mihawk probably feels that his advantage in a sword fight is just way too massive for his pride, and that's the reason he doesn't want to fight Shanks. And I actually saw a post about this. Some people may say, oh, why doesn't Shanks move his scabbard location to the opposite side of his body to accommodate his right hand? But if you look at 1SBS volume 25, Oda was questioned why Zoro had his swords held at his right hip, and Oda stated that Zoro needs something heavy on his right side to keep him from leaning. So Oda takes comfortability into account with his characters, and that's most likely why Shanks kept his scabbard on the right side. He has had it that way for most of his life, and he doesn't want to switch it because it would cause more discomfort than he probably cares to deal with. So yeah, that should help answer that. After this long ass explanation, do you see how nuanced this argument could be? It's literally insane. That's all I got for Shanks' section. I'm not here really to pick a side, even though I would like to believe that Shanks might be stronger than Mihawk out of pure bias. In all actuality, with all the evidence, Mihawk most likely is stronger, but I was just pointing out certain things that can make this argument very wacky. But a quick question, what is a swordsman exactly? And does Oda get to pick and choose who's a swordsman? So let's talk about that real quick. So a swordsman in One Piece is very tricky to determine because a lot of people like to use the term pure swordsman for some reason. Anytime we talk about swordsman in One Piece, the term pure swordsman is used, especially when it pertains to Mihawk and Shanks, because they want to cope and they want to label it as pure because they want to say that Mihawk is only stronger than Shanks because Mihawk can only beat Shanks in a pure swordsmanship battle, and Shanks is more than a swordsman. So it's really more of a coping mechanism, if anything. However, when it comes to swordsmanship, it's really up to Oda when it comes down to it. So Oda drew a swordsman panel one day, and we can clearly see that Shanks is on this panel with Rayleigh, Cavendish, Odin, Vista, Goldie Roger, Zoro, you know, all of the main swordsmen that we've seen in the story, and a couple of extras. We don't know what Oda classifies as a swordsman, and we know that characters like Law and Fujitora are swordsmen, and there's definitely something interesting about characters like them. Fujitora is a confirmed swordsman, and it also states in Fujitora's Viri card that he uses his sword to channel his attacks. So for characters like Law and Fujitora, their strongest attacks in the story involve devil fruit abilities. These guys use their devil fruits in conjunction with their sword attack. Fujitora with his massive meteor and Law's Kroom, Gamma Knife, and Room attacks in general are their strongest, most potent, most destructive attacks that they have shown so far. And those attacks makes the use of their abilities of the devil fruit. But that's not to say that if you are a swordsman, it does not mean you cannot be something else. So I could be a football player and a basketball player at the same time and also have high levels of mastery involving both of these sports. But the question is, what am I more masterful at? Do I need to be a master at both basketball and football in order to call myself a basketball player and a football player at the same time? So if I'm purely a basketball player, can I just do nothing else in the One Piece world? Can I never be a football player? You know, the word pure just throws me off way too crazy. And as I said before, it is mostly used to downplay Mihawk, if anything. So to be honest, if you use a sword a lot in One Piece, then Oda will eventually decide if you're a swordsman or not. I feel like it's not really worth the trouble of trying to figure out who is a swordsman. Oda, the literal author and god of the verse, can decide whoever becomes a swordsman, period. The only thing that comes into question would be if Mihawk would be stronger than swordsmen like Sword God Ryuma, Goldie Roger, and we can even see in a silhouette panel of Roxy the Beck back in the day wielding a sword. So would Mihawk be stronger than all three of these men if they're all classified as swordsmen? It's not really debatable for me. At the very least, I believe that Goldie Roger and Rox were 100% stronger than Mihawk. I can't be told otherwise until I get more definitive proof. I have Roger and Rox 1 and 2 strength-wise in the story ever so far, but as for some people, it's pretty debatable. In conclusion, you use a sword a lot, Oda decides, and that's that. So yeah, in the next section, I'm gonna put a theory out there as to what Mihawk's origin could be. So guys, as you can guess, this section is gonna be pretty headcanon-y, but let me give you a short story on what I think Mihawk's origin can be. By the way, my main inspiration on Mihawk's origin has to do with this picture I saw, and it's actually certain panels with Mihawk having a tattoo very similar to Doflamingo and Blueno. It's clear that there's some ties with the world government involving Mihawk, but other than that, this is all my own thoughts, and I promise I did not look at any other inspiration for this. This is pure headcanon. CP Black, Imu, the ultimate god of One Piece, a master of all haki, and the one who secretly rules over the entire world, is weakened due to an extraordinary use of his powers some time ago. The Gorosei offers Imu an idea on how to help control the world while Imu slowly recovers his power in the shadows. The Gorosei has come up with an idea to create the ultimate military force in the world, a CP agent faction whose cultivating process would be an utmost secret. The goal is to artificially create a group of soldiers that were powerful enough to not only surpass any CP agent, but also the greatest military force, the Admirals. The soldiers would be more efficient, cold, and strong enough to wipe out even the strongest pirates that would ever exist. The Gorosei pleaded with Imu to use his DNA to create the soldiers from his likeness, due to Imu being the ultimate power, and that a fraction of Imu's eye power would be transferred to his children with the help of the top scientist in the world, Dr. Vegapunk. After long thought, Imu decided that this option would be viable, and that this operation be labeled CP Black, and be held under absolute secrecy. With that, Dr. Vegapunk used the DNA of Imu and spliced it with strong warriors the world government had captured at the time, and created child soldiers with the eyes of God, and were trained to be the ultimate weapons. The operation was going well, with the children growing and maturing with the skills that were genetically passed down from Imu and other warriors. There was a child that showed the most promise, a young Mihawk, codenamed Dracule 0112. Young Mihawk was a prodigious talent that surpassed the likes of his siblings, and showed exceptional ability with the sword, an ability surely passed down from Imu's lineage, with Imu being the strongest swordsman to ever exist. With this, Mihawk was given special care and was treated differently from the other children with more brutalistic training. Their children, for the most part, were trained to be technically skilled, physically strong, and with the mind of absolute steel, the ultimate calmness with the ultimate destructiveness, taught that beyond anything to remain calm under pressure, do not waver, do not succumb, do not concede to overwhelming haki or devil fruit power. However, problems started to occur and the children were showing signs of defectiveness. The powers of Imu couldn't be passed on correctly, with glaring consequences soon forthcoming. Even the most prodigious talent Mihawk could not develop the eye's true powers. Some kids died of unnatural causes, and some kids lashed out against their superiors and had to be terminated. Some kids became null and ended up discarded by Dr. Vegapunk, being deemed useless. Most of the kids showed signs of mental diseases, becoming uncontrollable, and were no longer useful in according to the sole mission of CP Black. The kids could hardly be controlled. Mihawk soon saw his mentors and teachers as nothing more than prey to make him stronger, becoming harder to control by the day. The project was slowly turning into a failure, and torture was used to try to keep the rest of the children in check. However, one man discovered this operation and decided to put a stop to the program so that his plans wouldn't be hindered. That individual goes by Rox D. Zebek. Rox somehow found a secret training facility and fought the personnel that were guarding said facility. This was Mihawk's chance to escape, using the commotion as cover. The only kid to escape the CP Black program. With him gone, the world government chased him across the sea with Marines hot on his tail. The Marines were ignorant as to what their orders were. Their only orders were to bring back the kid Dracule. The Gorosei had lost a kid with the blood of Emu, which was unforgivable, and this mistake had to be hidden at all costs. With this absolute failure, the CP Black project was terminated completely, with any remaining children effectively terminated as well. As Mihawk traveled throughout the years, killing the Marines that were chasing him, eventually ran into Rox again. Rox, who should have been dead, was weakened heavily, suffering heavy wounds after his loss to the combined efforts of Garp and Roger. Mihawk's personality got the better of him, and could think of nothing but fighting Rox at that moment, no matter what Rox's current condition was. And Mihawk wanted to fight the man who gave him his freedom to test his strength. Rox swiftly and decidedly crushed Mihawk with sword skills on another plane of existence. Rox showed mercy to the kid, and decided that Mihawk's potential was otherworldly, sensing a similar but a more faint power of Emu. He decided that for sparing Mihawk's life, Mihawk would now work for him, and in turn he would teach Mihawk the way of his sword. Rox would train Mihawk while enacting his new plan. First, from a revenge aspect, to wipe out Emu's dogs, the Marines. Mihawk would eventually be known as the Naval Hunter, with Rox as his swordsmaster. Mihawk would grow to extraordinary heights. Over time, Mihawk began to grow fond of Rox for not only teaching him the way of the sword, but grew very interested in Rox's goal and his mission in life, to becoming king of the world. However, Rox was dying due to all the accumulated damage. Rox swearing that he will take revenge on all that's tried to stop his plans, and that his rightful place as king was stolen by him yet again. Before dying, he left a secret message to Mihawk, and a small part of said message was about his son, a red-haired boy, stolen by Roger that would surely become an extremely powerful and notable warrior. And before succumbing to his illness, he told Mihawk that he will not die, and that he will live on till he finishes his mission. Mihawk, with this secret message and the knowledge about Rox's son, set out to sea yet again, by himself, looking for the world's best swordsman to try to surpass his master Rox, vowing that he will never lose to anyone but Rox ever again, while also making sure to accomplish Rox's last final request. He even attended the execution of Roger, another legendary figure who not only was one of the world's strongest swordsmen, but the one who directly thwarted Rox's plan. He wanted to see what kind of man Roger was and what his true strength was as well, to be able to surpass the likes of his master. There, he met Shanks, who Mihawk immediately recognized Shanks and knew that he would grow into one of the most legendary warriors of all time, especially with Rox's lineage. Mihawk would challenge Shanks, and from then on have legendary duels with this man. And after Shanks sacrificed his arm, he decided to never fight Shanks in a sword duel ever again, not only out of respect as a swordsman, but not to disgrace the name of his old master Rox. Mihawk would eventually become a warlord to find out more information on the Marine system that he could exploit, and to give this information to the person who has adopted the will of Rox D'Zebek, Blackbeard. Even though he was known as a person who hunted Marines back in the day, the Gorosei allowed Mihawk to join the warlord system, as not to only keep a strong enemy at bay, but an enemy who has the blood of the one true king. And if push comes to shove, Emu could eventually be used to take him out swiftly and effectively. And history moves on, and the only thing on Mihawk's mind is to find and cultivate the world's strongest swordsman who could eventually surpass him and have a fantastic legendary duel with, and to execute Rox's final order. Okay, so this origin story was completely fabricated by me, but I thought it sounded pretty cool, to be honest. So please don't hate on it too much. I know there's certain parts where, oh, Rox D'Zebek found Mihawk at the age of what, like 5 or something? He was like 5 or 6, something like that, the way my story was written. And I'm also stating that Rox was alive a little bit after the God Valley incident as well. So yeah, Mihawk, in my opinion, he definitely could have been a menace by the time he was 5 or 6. I honestly think Mihawk is one of the most prodigious talents in the world of One Piece to ever exist. So yeah, don't try to hate on it too crazy. There's definitely 100% a connection between Mihawk, Cavendish, Zunisha, and Emu, and there's definitely importance to the eyes. And I just want to throw this little thing out there. To be honest, I think that Cavendish might be a failed clone experiment with Mihawk's DNA. Let's just look at them really quick. Mihawk and Cavendish dressed pretty much the same. They look like the angel and devil opposites of each other. And Cavendish has a personality disorder just like Mihawk. And when this other personality comes out for Cavendish, he has the eyes of God, or the eyes of Emu. So again, I think Cavendish is a later failed clone experiment of Mihawk. And I think that Mihawk is a direct clone of Emu. And I already thought of a connection of the eyes with the characters, but that's coming in another video. But with all that said, let's just get into what Mihawk's theorized powers could be. Okay, so what are the abilities that Mihawk is hiding? Let's talk about a couple of things really quickly. So in the show, we have a couple of concepts such as Breath of All Things, the Voice of All Things, and then Conqueror's Haki, Observation, Armament Haki. So these abilities are pretty much confirmed, and there's advanced versions of each type of Haki. So let's go over everything that I just said. So as far as the Voice of All Things, I believe that it is special to only a certain group of individuals. We've only seen characters like Momonosuke, Luffy, Goldie Roger, and Odin use this ability. I do not believe that Mihawk would have the ability of the Voice of All Things. It just seems to be a certain trait that only extremely special people can use. By the way, all the concepts like Haki, Voice of All Things, and Breath of All Things, I'm going to make separate videos on each of these powers and get really into depth with it, and I don't want to explain everything in this video. As far as Breath of All Things is concerned, Mihawk most likely has complete mastery over this ability. The Breath of All Things, in a broad and general sense, is an ability that lets you cut whatever you want to cut. So basically, the best swordsmen in the world can cut what they want to cut, and whatever they don't want to cut will not be cut. So you will see the best swordsman cut solid pieces of iron and not cut a piece of paper in one solid swing without changing the swing at all. So imagine you slash up and down. While you're slashing down, say if a rock and a pencil is in the way, you'll cut the rock on the slash down if you want to cut it, and with the same slash as you're still going down, you can control not being able to cut the pencil without changing the swing in its entirety. This is an ability that will most likely help Zoro in his fight with Shiryu, who has an invisible fruit, and his awakening most likely turns him into nothingness, and Zoro will be able to achieve the pinnacle in swordsmanship, which is the ability to cut nothing. Mihawk most definitely already mastered that aspect of swordsmanship. Okay, as far as Haki goes, Mihawk has some of the best armament Haki in the story, especially because of the fact that Mihawk was able to make his blade a permanent black blade. So Mihawk most likely mastered Advanced Ryo as well. As for Conqueror's Haki, I highly doubt that Mihawk does not have Conqueror's Haki. He has to have it. If he's really able to keep up with the top tiers in the show without Conqueror's Haki coding, then that's beyond insane. Especially when you have characters like Whitebeard, Goldie Roger, Big Mom, Luffy, literally the top of the top characters in the show. And how can I forget Shanks? All of these guys use advanced Conqueror's Haki, and for me to just be up here saying that Mihawk doesn't have it would be very hard pressed for me to say. So he can most likely use advanced Conqueror's Haki as well. Early in the video, I stated that Mihawk might have the most potent observation Haki, but maybe not the most powerful, and I'll explain the difference between that and the observation Haki video. But let's get into some theorized abilities. Now, when I was trying to research what Mihawk's powers were, I found an article online. Somebody by the name of Ayongwa Matthew Shu had a theory on what Mihawk's true power could be involving Mihawk's eyes. Basically, the theory is that Mihawk can project someone's future into someone else's mind using the most advanced observation Haki possible. So when Luffy attacked Mihawk in the Marineford War, it wasn't Luffy predicting the future, it was Mihawk showing Luffy his fate using a form of advanced observation Haki, and Luffy saw this and retracted his attack. So this ability is definitely powerful, but it seems to have some glaring weaknesses, but I will get into that in another video. But he most likely has that ability, and we can see Zunisha do the same thing to Momonosuke and Luffy when showing Jack the Drought's ship and fleet and projected that vision into Luffy and Momonosuke. Zoro also might be using a similar ability, like when he was fighting Monet and she thought she was gonna die. Zoro could have projected her fate in her mind, making her literally think she was gonna die. And if you look at Mihawk's Vivid card, there's actually the word Senrigan, which involves the use of clairvoyant powers, and Mihawk the Clairvoyant was actually supposed to be Mihawk's previous epithet. And while looking up the word Senrigan, because I didn't know what it was at first, but it has to do with clairvoyant abilities, but the first article that pops up is actually a Naruto fandom link. I watch Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, but I don't keep up with Loruto, but there is a dojutsu in Loruto named Senrigan that's used by a character named Ada, and she literally has the ability to project her consciousness to any location and to see and hear any present event. So honestly, this greatly supports the theory that Mihawk has a similar ability to project futures into someone else's mind. I know that's from Naruto, but yikes, the connection was almost a little too glaring, to be honest. Some people believe that Mihawk's eye also allows him to see even further in the future than Katakuri and is permanently in a future world. I do not believe that at all. I kind of want to spaz out right now, like more future sight and all that. That just seems kind of lame to me. I don't want to really spaz out right now, and I'll wait for another video, but nah. He may have an ability that lets him see further in the future, but that can't be what's special about Mihawk. We also found out recently that Shanks can apparently kill someone's observation haki, so logically the only way to counteract this is to obviously have even greater observation haki. You would think that, right? But I'm not too sure about that, to be honest. There's also theories that Mihawk's eyes can be used in conjunction with observation to find the weaknesses of somebody that he is fighting, and he defeats his opponents by exploiting all of their weak points, making for an easy win. I guess the ability would be good if you weren't the most physically strong or if you are lacking in haki in some departments. Finding weak points would definitely help him keep up with top tiers, but that ability has been already done before if you look at what Chopper's done in the past, and Oda is a little too creative for that, to be honest. So we might see something a little bit different rather than finding the weak points of someone. And I also personally believe that Mihawk most likely has a spirit projection, just like with Zoro and Ashura. Mihawk most likely has some sort of angelic-like spiritual projection, like having a spiritual image of the Archangel Michael or some type of powerful angelic deity hovering over him when he's serious. You know, with the whole Holy Cross vibes theme going on with Mihawk. Zoro the demon versus Mihawk the angel, something like that. But to be honest, here's my problem with all these theories. It just makes way too much sense, and after thinking about everything, there's just a glaring amount of weaknesses associated with everything except for the spirit projection part. But everything else, like implanting someone's future into them, seeing even further into the future than characters like Katakuri, or the ability to exploit the weaknesses of a person, just seems a little predictable. So Oda, after all of these years, pretty much gave Mihawk and the others with this eye better, more advanced observation haki, and that's that. That's probably a whole lot of cap. I believe that anybody with this eye, except for Imu, has some sort of problem with controlling it, and that no one, even Mihawk, has it anywhere near perfect. Look at what happened with Luffy in Gear 5. Luffy has been gaining strength under the premise that he will use rubber the whole show, with nothing too special about his fruit coming anytime in the story. Then some amazing theorist YouTuber I watched at the time, Uteron, believed that Luffy will have a resin fruit because of hints with Luffy and resin with the monkey in the cover art, resin bubbles and things of that nature. And in the chapter when Luffy died, it looked as if his body was liquefying, and everybody for like 2 weeks swore on their mama that it was confirmed to be a resin fruit. And I think this event almost proved that Oda is most definitely watching theory videos, and he might be laughing at us, to be honest. He literally drew Luffy as if he was turning into resin, and then made Luffy Sun God Nika something that was completely different than the resin theory, with the resin theory being almost universally accepted within that time frame. It's like Oda knew that certain people would figure out the hints that Oda put out there, just to have people craft theories based on the hints that he puts out there, and people who craft the theories believe that it's most certainly gonna happen, and then to have it turn into something completely different. That's why the current theories about Mihawk makes too much sense to me. Oda has had 20 plus years to come up with something crazy different, and I have some pretty interesting ideas as to what Mihawk's power could really be. But to sum up what his current abilities are one more time, Mihawk most likely does not have the ability of Voice of All Things. He most likely has the ability of Breath of All Things, which should let him cut anything, including nothing, and most likely mastered it. I believe Mihawk has Conqueror's Haki, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, Future Sight, and Advanced Armament Haki. He most likely has the ability to implant someone's future into them, or the ability to project scenarios into anyone, period. He most likely has a spiritual projection like Zoro, which could be angelic in nature, and he just might be able to pinpoint someone's weaknesses and exploit them like a hawk. He probably has excellent vision like a hawk as well, but there has to be something more to his powers and the powers of the eye. Oda loves to throw absolute curveballs at us, and he's always crossing us up, and I'm ready for all of it. I can't wait to put all of my theories on each separate ability in One Piece. But this is the end of my video, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This video was ridiculously long, and I don't know if I want to make videos this long that often, to be honest. And this has taken a crazy amount of time from my other videos. It's hard to balance this and work at the same time. But I hope you guys enjoyed. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And be on the lookout for more anime videos like Demon Slayer, Chainsaw Man, One Punch Man, Dragon Ball Super, and so much more. But with all that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining me again, and take care, everybody. Peace.